I'm still Andrew Beebe. We met earlier during the Accelerate program. I'm not going to do introductions for everyone here because maybe they need no introduction, also because you see their names and backgrounds up on the screens in front of you, I think. For those of you who was here, this was asked earlier, but who was here last year? I'm not doing this in emojis, if you remember that. I was the emoji guy. No one remembered anything in the conclusions of what I was actually saying, but they do remember the emojis. This will not be an emoji presentation. Instead, this will be the presentation on gender and ethnic diversity in the sustainability world. We were doing so well, and then we came up. But anyway, thank you so much for being with us. Last time I was on the Verge stage, I interviewed Jigar Shah. Now, for those of you who were there, you may recall this was 2 months before the election, and he actually called Trump, which a lot of people, most people in the audience laughed and assumed he was making a joke, and I assure you, and you may now realize he was not. So you never know what can happen on the Verge stage. Pay attention. This could be that exciting. Earlier today, we talked a lot about, and I heard some conflicting views. One of the quotes up, which I thought was great, from Hank Paulson that Kate put up, was around the fact that we don't need energy miracles. And that's something that I've been repeating a lot, and I think there's been some confusion and concern about that. However, on the other side, the folks from Hawaii, who I think are really the point of the spear in terms of our movement to 100%, continually point out that the first 25 or 30% of renewables was really not that hard. I know a lot of hard work went into it, but ultimately wasn't that hard technically. The next 80 or 70% transition here in Hawaii at the front end of this transformation is going to be exceptionally difficult, and maybe increasingly difficult as we get to that 100% mark. So that's a little bit of the conversation we're going to have today, which is around how we can unleash innovation and do that at large companies and startups alike, do that at the very local level, and do that at the global level. And I want to have a conversation in that framework of starting locally and then bookending it with globally. I think it's important because locally in Hawaii, again, we have a 100% renewable commitment, which is just an extraordinary commitment reaffirmed recently post-election. And then globally, of course, we have, I think, 195 countries around the world signed up for Paris, 194 countries signed up for Paris, and then something in between in the US at a federal or national level. So there's a lot of interesting discussion right now about what it's going to take to innovate. So Rich, I thought being local versus the rest of us, it might be helpful if you could give us a sense. American Savings Bank plays a key role in the community here in Hawaii. How does innovation work for you, for the bank, and how do you encourage it with your customers in the community?
Yeah, so we've been playing a role in supporting the innovation economy here. I'm also currently the chair of the Business Roundtable. The Business Roundtable has been pretty active in trying to drive the awareness of what we need to do to get the innovation economy here growing. And so it's really been about recognizing, and I hope for everybody who's visiting, that there's a lot more here than meets the eye. I think you've seen with the Elemental Accelerator and the work they've done, the work that Alan talked about that Hawaiian Electric's doing with other introducing technologies and being a test bed for technology and innovation here. We've got a really nice environment where, for good reason, we are a place where a lot of this innovation can be tested and brought to bear. So what we're really trying to do is look at making the connections, right? Making connections between UH and the great areas of research that UH has, the business community. We've got the federal and military presence here, which brings, again, another set of tremendous resources to the community, whether it's the NSA and the work they do around cyber, the big data that is naturally an area of research at UH because of the astronomy and the health sciences work that they do. And so bringing those connections to the business community as well to really focus on how do we commercialize more and more of what's going on. And so what we've been trying to do is get the traditional business community engaged more in, number one, recognizing why this is really important to the state, because our our traditional areas of tourism and the military presence aren't going to add the kind of growth that we need. This area of economic activity is so compatible with the sustainable environment that we want to create and what we can do here. It's a wonderful place where people want to work. You can tell, you come here, it's a great place to work, a great place to live. And so making the connections of all those great resources are what we're really trying to get done.
And you, to me, the Elemental Accelerator is great because it started as the Energy Accelerator, started with a more Hawaii-centric focus and is now very successfully exporting itself nationally and internationally. How did that happen?
I think it's the great team that you saw with Dawn, with Maurice, and the team that came over from Pictor, which was, again, out of the military presence and a lot of the Navy research that was being done. That got spun off to be more focused on the private sector, and they brought in companies at a national level to work in the environment here because it is such a perfect test bed. And so the more we get the visibility of that, then they brought the visibility to Hawaii and their capabilities, and I think the strength of the people and the resources that we're working on it made it natural to export. There's a couple of other great ones. There's an Accelerate Accelerator, which is really focused on other technology out of the University of Hawaii. And then there's one many of you probably already know, Blue Startups, which was kind of the first one here. All three are nationally recognized and I think bringing good energy and visibility to Hawaii.
Great. Brian, as the representative of Microsoft here, I was thinking you could respond to the Zune comment from earlier.
Yeah, I'd like to have a conversation with Luis after this. No, nobody bought a Zune, we know that.
But seriously, tell us about what the company has been doing here specifically in Hawaii, and are there ways that you're able to use some of the testbed natures, particularly on the energy front, which you lead a lot of?
Yeah, so we actually have been able to participate in Hawaii. A really exciting project for me because I'm passionate about the topic generally, but we worked with a company called Shifted Energy Mesh Systems in Steffes to do an aggregated electric water heater project here at the, I believe it's the Capitola Lofts. But what's great about that project is it taps into existing grid resources to create storage. Right? I mean, you can store energy using water, in fact, much more efficiently than doing it chemically with batteries. And so it's just one example of how, with better data and analytics and insight about what's happening on the grid and better controls, we can get more out of the grid we have as opposed to just constantly bolting on more stuff and more technology. Much of it may not even be needed if we just had better insight as to how to best operate the grid that we have.
Yeah. Great. And what about GE? What are you all, I'm sure you're doing a lot here broadly, but maybe current by GE, what are the things you focus on locally to drive innovation and help out as this transformation is taking place?
Yeah, so GE Current is formed as a startup within GE to really focus on distributed energy and how we can be more aware of how we're using energy. It's not just how we generate from renewable sources, but then how do we use it more efficiently, more consciously? How can we be more contextually adaptive in our use of it? But GE overall with Hawaii, we've really tried to focus more on how we work across the business units in GE in a more collaborative fashion with Hawaii. So rather than moving the focus from what products to how can we help with the new outcomes Hawaii is looking for. And just some examples of that over just the last couple of years is working on the Accelerator program with GE Ventures, working on the renewables standards report with Hawaii's Natural Energy Institute. You can find all this if you just search GE Energy Hawaii. There's a number of initiatives and also working in a much more collaborative fashion with HECO, with Hawaiian Electric. And it works both ways. Connie Lau, the CEO of Hawaiian Electric, is now serving on our board for GE Eco-Imagination, which we really appreciate. So we're getting ideas and driving new outcomes in both directions.
Great. So we're here in Hawaii, 100%, everyone is 100%. Now I want to make things more challenging and controversial. We'll talk about national issues. Because while people kept saying 100% earlier, there was a tweet from the White House that said 100%, wrong, sad, Hawaii. No, that didn't happen, but it could. It could. It's easy. We got to wait till 4 a.m. Eastern time. Let me ask you.
You have to say it with the gestures.
Yeah. Not much. Okay, so nationally, here's a real but difficult question. If we could talk about policies that would help innovation or help us on this journey toward 100%, name one or two things federally that you would love to see happen that might unlock or unleash some of the innovation in the energy and transportation realms. Dave, we'll start with you. You can't say, don't screw anything up. That's not an option. It has to be something proactive. Like, what could they do that's new, not just rolling stuff?
Yeah, well, I'm back on the theme of collaboration, to drive innovation. So any way policies can support that. One of the things that we've been trying to do as we collect data about how energy is being used is to make that data available through an open API, and then work with the local universities, with the local software companies, actually anybody that just wants to get in and participate. So, ways that we can foster that type of creativity, because we don't have all the answers. I don't think any single company has all the answers.
So this is like a data exchange, like in the state of California does this. They allow increasingly more and more access to customer data, anonymized, but to give raw data so that you can look at patterns.
Exactly.
Yeah, Brian, any?
I think so much of the debate, discussion around innovation in this space happens at the state level, right? We hear about what's happening here in Hawaii and then California and New York with the REV process. But there is still the important element, I think, of the role of the FERC in wholesale market design. And I think that's an element that is a bit problematic right now in terms of thinking about how do you really open up a marketplace where we can achieve, as someone said earlier, these really high rates of renewable penetration, because wholesale markets were not designed, at least the way that we operate them today, to accept that much zero variable cost energy. Right? They're marginal cost-based model. It's based on short-run marginal costs. And so the more renewables you put on the grid, the more you distort those market signals, and that becomes really problematic. That's largely what's driving this whole issue at the DOE right now about trying to provide protections for baseload resources as if they're somehow, being aggrieved. The reality is, though, we don't have a market design that is going to get us from where we are today to where we need to go. And I agree, this 25% is pretty easy. The next 75% is going to be incredibly difficult. When we talk about not needing energy miracles, and I think I agree with that from a technology standpoint, but when we talk about the business model innovation that needs to happen to a 100-year-old business model, and you need regulated electric utilities and regulators to lead the way, I don't know, that sounds like pretty close to needing an energy miracle. But
Needing a political miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've been focused a lot on policy in Hawaii. We were just able to get through the last legislative session some law changes that allow the researchers at the University of Hawaii to actually engage in private sector business. They weren't really allowed to do that previously because it ran up against some of the ethics rules. And so a more contemporary look at what's done in other communities where innovation is vibrant, and how do we bring those things here to Hawaii. The University of Hawaii now has a mandate that they can invest in commercial activities that are driven by technology innovation at the university. And so those kinds of things, we've got room in our own state policy to make a lot of progress where we can advance what's already here. And the whole thing is really connecting all these amazing resources that we have to let the smart people figure things out.
And I suspect federally, from a military perspective as well, that support is, talking to people today, seems unwavering in terms of its commitment, and that meshing that with the universities here is critical as well.
Is critical, right.
Yeah.
And I think, what's very important alongside the 100% is the cost of electricity, because the cost of business in Hawaii is very high for all the reasons we know. And so really making sure that the policies drive the 100% renewables at affordable costs for business is really critical here, and keeping that cost element front and center in the policy.
Yeah, I mean, you know, something that struck me in the last 6 months, the top 5 technology companies, top 5 companies in the world globally by market cap are tech companies and are American-based technology companies who drive most of the new growth in energy in the Fortune 100. And most of that energy is about data centers and data around the world. All 5 of those companies have committed to 100% renewable. And actually, some of them committed after the election. And it would appear that, some of them have already made it. Salesforce has gone further and said that they're going to do net zero carbon throughout their business. So that involves transportation and other things, not just their electricity use. And Apple and others, and I think Microsoft, are also moving up the supply chain in terms of their demand. Right. So maybe Brian and GE too, but when you think about as a innovator at the business model level, I know you've done a lot of work in terms of how you purchase power and how you help others, either by aggregating purchase power. Is there anything you would talk about there in innovation just in business models?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting that, you know, we have transitioned to where all these large tech companies are all also big energy consumers. And so, you know, our interest in this is twofold. One, you know, we're interested because as a technology company, we provide some of the core architecture for the machine learning and the analytics that are absolutely necessary for us to make the sort of leap we need to make from a business model standpoint. But it's also just pretty important to running our business. Right? It's a huge input. I mean, electricity is the raw material of the cloud. Right? We take electrons in and we put them in our servers, and cat photos come out. Right? That's what keeps the whole thing running. And so, you know, that really has become a really important part of what we do. And so our interest is really heightened because it's our lifeblood. It's what we do every day. And I think there's also an important element in thinking about the fact that we're building this infrastructure that is going to be critically important for really all the innovations that occur in the next century. If you think about the electric grid, right? The electric grid really was the foundational technology of the 20th century. Everything important, every innovation that happened because of the electric grid, right? It was critical. Next century it's going to be about data. It's going to be about data centers. That is going to be the fundamental architecture, the infrastructure that's going to drive innovation. And so I think we really feel like that at Microsoft, at least, that we're leaving a legacy with what we build. You know, we're having to now recover from the legacy of the last century of what was built and the dependency on fossil fuels. And we want to make sure that we don't make that same mistake as we build out the next century's power plants, if you will, in the form of data centers.
Yeah, we feel like we've really got to lead the charge with our own usage of energy. I'm working on, for example, the new GE headquarters building, which is going in Boston. It's going to have a huge solar veil on top of it. But it's not just about how we're using renewables, but it's how we're using the energy. There's just a huge, and we haven't talked a lot about that today, but there's just a huge opportunity to more efficiently use what we've got, right? I mean, achieving net zero is about both sides of the equation. So, and I think if you think about IoT as going into this 2.0 now of IoT, industrial internet, as we call it in GE, it really gives us ability on the edge to understand what's happening at the moment. What's the context we're applying energy in? Have the doors been left open, right? Are the lights on when nobody's in the building? There's all kinds of opportunities. So one of the reasons they moved LED to us, not just for the energy savings that they can drive, and lighting controls to do better daylight harvesting, and tying it to energy management system, but that can serve as our IoT endpoint. So we've put the intelligence in the lights. I like to phrase it as, when people say, what am I doing at a dinner party? I say I'm working on the all-knowing neural network of lights. And that usually is pretty good to get a conversation going. Either that or they just walk away, but, you know.
Could be total silence.
There could be total silence,
Tonight,
but you know, it's a great IoT endpoint because it's ubiquitous, and you know, we're always going to need lights, and there's already power going to them. So if we can put in that type of sensor technology and not only do a lot more processing on the edge within the fixture itself, but to respond, you know.
I want to go to this in a second, go to the sidebar to ask questions from the broader audience here. But just quickly, for the two global corporations on the stage, can you just explain how the world, the customers outside of the US, have they expressed concern about any change in behavior or corporate behavior because of the election here, because of the political change on Paris? Or is there a clear understanding that the companies are continuing forward with their core message? Half of your revenue comes globally. Do you have to spend time explaining that to folks, or is it just stay the course?
Not a lot of time. We just make the statement, we're staying the course. You know, we're committed to it right to the top of the company, and they go great, and we move on.
Okay.
Yeah, it's same here. I think I was really pleased to see the response from my CEO, from your former CEO, immediately following the Paris decision, and it was crystal clear that the big corporations are not changing course at all. And there's no doubt corporations have outsized influence in our society. But that was one of those moments where I was thankful and really very proud to work at a big corporation that's willing to stand up for what's important and what it believes in, and it's not even coming close to backing down on this issue.
Elaine, anything?
Yes, so I know none of you guys represent necessarily the entrenched utility or kind of an infrastructure provider necessarily, unless Rich, maybe you do have some insights around this, but how can organizations that are focused on reliability and affordability, which I believe all three of your organizations are, get out of this pilot hell where you can actually take the plunge and have a kind of more increased risk appetite and invest in the capital necessary to be more proactive in designing for the future rather than maintaining the past? Like, what are those mechanisms to be able to really unleash that?
Energy miracles.
How do you avoid death by pilot as a small company who wants to engage with any of you?
You know, one of the words I used in the beginning was driving new outcomes, and utilities have the opportunity to drive whole new outcomes just with the real estate they own. Again, if you think about it as IoT endpoints, we can drive new outcomes that go from energy to people's well-being, their ability to be productive and efficient and safe. So that alone could drive a whole new set of innovation, and that's a lot of the conversations we're having.
So you're counseling some of your larger customers on the utility side about how to take the leaps a little bit further than just try one, see what happens 3 years later. Yeah.
I think as a user, the pilots are good because it helps us raise our risk appetite by going through the pilots and learning and being able to dive in then once we build our confidence. I think for the entrenched, quote unquote, entrenched guys like the utility, the biggest challenge is the regulators, right? Because they have to convince the regulators that it's worth making those big investments. And so it's a process of education and collaboration with the regulatory officials too to build the confidence to make those investments.
Right, because there's a policy component as well, right? Regulators can put in place long-term support mechanisms. California Storage Program, the REV effort in New York. I mean, these things are setting up very large-scale safety nets to get across that valley of death.
Right.
Yeah. The biggest challenge, I think, though, is that you don't know really how the consumer is going to respond. Right? We're talking about doing these pilots and experimenting, and there's obviously a lot of resistance from utilities to really truly transform their business model and put more power in the hands of the consumer. And they can send out surveys, and consumers may say, well, I don't know if I'll do this or that. Until you actually put smart devices in the homes and start to really affect and provide opportunities for how consumers behave, it almost becomes just a thought exercise until we actually do it. And it's it's a really difficult step to take. And that's where the energy miracle comes in. Like, how do we get that business model transformation to happen fast enough?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all the time we have. So we need energy entrepreneurs, we need amazing innovation, we need some probably political or regulatory heroes, and maybe a political miracle here and there. And some innovation discussion over beers later tonight.
Piece of cake.
Okay, thank you.